Hello and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast, a community of amazing people who love talking about and sharing their love for the details behind making games, whether or not you're based actually in London or not. So I'm your host, I'm Oscar Clark, he, him pronouns, and I'm on a quest to understand everything you want to know about game dev, but never dared to ask. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Ioana, who works with a whole bunch of amazing games on Snap. So I'm going to bring her on the screen, and Ioana, tell us all about yourself and what you do at Mojiworks.
Thank you for introducing me. My name is Ioana. My pronouns are she, her. I've been working in mobile for like 4 and a bit years, and I've been doing specifically chat-based games for about 3.5. So like pretty early on into my career, I got into this. It was interesting, our journey at Mojiworks, because we started off with iMessage, and then we moved on to Facebook Messenger, and then where we are now is we work exclusively with Snapchat to create Snapchat games. And it's a world of very interesting stuff, because these are basically highly social multiplayer casual games, which are kind of a step beyond what things like Farmville used to be on Facebook back in the day. They have all of the good stuff that games like Among Us has been seen to have great success with. It's just an amalgamation of like very social, very interesting, casual multiplayer games.
No, completely, and it's interesting for me particularly because a couple of guys behind the Play Canvas thing that Snap bought used to work with me back at,
Yeah.
in fact, Dave and Will basically worked with me at PlayStation Home on the virtual world. So it was kind of amazing to see those guys getting snapped up, for pardoning the pun. But I mean, you've worked on all sorts of games, haven't you? So obviously you've done a lot of mobile, but you've done some VR stuff as well, if I recall correctly.
Yes. So before I started my professional journey, or whatever you want to call it, before I worked for a company as a designer, I had like loads of independent game endeavors. And we actually have created this like little game studio with me and my brother. And we experimented with all sorts of stuff, because always my thing with game design was pushing the boundaries of what was possible and innovating on the small things. That's why I think I've ended up working with Mojiworks, because it's like innovation in a very specific way. And when we were doing VR, what we were trying to do is use mobile VR, but amp it up to behave like a high-end headset. And it was some very interesting experimentation being done. It didn't end up taking us anywhere specifically, but that's kind of the point, is like the joy of experimenting and trying to see if there is something where you're going is basically what I think we should do a lot more in all aspects of video games, because
Completely. Yeah, I mean, I'm exactly so. We kind of jokingly call me the chief of curiosity here, because I'm always thinking about what's next, and that's kind of why I have this kind of mission to sort of explore everything about game dev. I'm a big believer that I've been doing this 20 odd years. I kind of knew I wanted to be a game designer when I was 18. I pitched in, this is 1987.
Oh my
I
God.
know, scary. I'm old. My first game pitch, it went really well. We were told, "Great game, come back when you made it." And of course, we couldn't afford to. We were young, we were naive. My mate, who was the coder, went off and got an amazing job, and he designed. He basically was one of the lead coder behind Oracle's payroll platform. But that was a massive loss to the games industry, as far as I'm concerned. At least personally, it was a loss. But he was my best mate, so I can't complain. The point being is that it took me 10 years because I didn't know how to get into games at the time. But I always was thinking I was ending up, I did a lot of board game design, did a lot of kind of touring around. But again, always experimenting, always thinking about what was the things in a game that really made it zing. And I've got to do some really fantastic stuff, even live action role playing game. I used to write games where I think the largest number of people I think we had playing a 4-hour game was something around 52.
Wow, that's
Yeah, imagine that. 52 people, all of whom have to feel like they're the hero. Well, a major player in the game, all of whom have to feel like they've got objectives to fulfill. And you've got to get all of the information out there in a way where everyone can achieve something. And I mean, amazing lesson in learning to write, amazing lesson in learning what games are. But even then, playing around with board game pieces, playing around with computer games, working with mobile games, all these aspects. Because I've worked on PC, mobile, and console. I've worked with virtual worlds. I've even designed blockchain. I know that's a bad word for lots of people. But I actually think there's some interesting stuff there. What do you? I mean, I don't want to go into this too much, but I'd love to know what you think
about blockchain specifically.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I don't think so. I do have sort of a bit of a my problem is with the environmental impact,
absolutely.
right?
No, absolutely.
So I don't tend to frown upon game mechanics because I think it's not the mechanics that is broken, it's like how ways to exploit it, right?
Precisely.
Because if you think about like you can play poker in a fun way, where it's like you make sure it's not the same way that you play poker when you're like gambling out in a casino, right? And I think this is the problem in my opinion, and this is why there is such a big divide sometimes between the people who work in console and computer games and the people who work in mobile. But I feel like sometimes the people who work in mobile are a little bit more open to experimenting with mechanics that are a little bit like risky, like they're going into risky places. Because there is this stigma that like there are mechanics that are inherently evil. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I don't believe mechanics can be evil. Like
maybe that's what we should call this episode. Can game mechanics be evil?
Exactly. Like that's such a big topic, and that's the kind of thing that I think every time I go to a game convention, and it was interesting, right? Because I just came from Develop Brighton when I ended up speaking about what I did. I just had so many interesting conversations with people who were doing a different kind of work from me, and who were kind of like they kind of were intrigued by it, but they were kind of like silently judging it as well. Because there is this understanding that like if you're making your money through ads, or if you're making your money through like I don't know, if say loot box like 3 times, and like a console game designer would appear next to you and explain to you why loot boxes are evil, right?
Exactly.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with the mechanic. I think there are ways to be like respectful to your players.
But that's the whole point, isn't it? We, whatever the mechanics and in fact, I think this is kind of where we were going to go with this topic anyway, which is I want to explore what mechanics, how we look at games, how we slice games. And I think you and I both come from the same principle, which is that we want to put the player experience first.
Yes.
That now we happen to be commercial game designers, so we're very keen on making sure that when we build an experience that we have a revenue stream associated with that. That's part of our design, but it's a supplementary part. It's a it's a secondary stage, but an essential stage, so that we can make the next game. At least that's my way of looking at it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I've seen there's so many schools of thought, and it's a fascinating conversation because like if we look at it, there is still like per hour of entertainment, games are the cheapest medium of entertainment. And you wouldn't go to like a director that makes a film and puts it in the cinema to yell at them that you don't want to pay £16 to go see it in 3D, right? Because you know what you're getting. And to be honest with you, I think most of the time it's not the players who are really against it. And this is something that I would love to explore with you, because what we found is that our players, obviously they don't like being taken advantage of, and that's we don't want to take advantage of them. But there are moments where they don't mind being monetized because they know that they're getting a service for free in our case.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's actually interesting because where I pursue that a little bit further is I think there's an expectation that because you pay up front, therefore that is good, and that's not actually the definition of it. I mean, premium does not mean pay up front.
Yeah.
Premium means it's high quality. There's nothing to stop you having a premium experience. Premium
Mm.
means it's high price, high quality. That's what it literally is meant to mean.
Yeah.
So if you have a premium asset in a free to play game,
Mm.
that's a literal experience of premium.
Exactly.
I mean, I get the feeling that you have the same frustrations I do.
Yeah, I do 100% because so just a bit of background, we monetize most of our games through advertising. And we do that because that's what it's the most accessible for our players. Like
Yeah.
most of our players are like under a certain age, they don't have disposable income, they still play our games, they want to play our games. We make sure that not we, but like Snapchat, it's actually like a pretty like careful company. They care about their users a lot. They want to make sure that the advertising that it's on their platform is suitable for their
Yes,
audience as well.
absolutely.
um we They put measures in place that we are not allowed to spam them. We wouldn't do it anyway, but they are specific about how much we can do it. So we found that the most accessible way for our players to engage with us in a financial way is for them to watch ads, and we give them rewarded ads so they can interact with the game more. If they don't want to watch ads, that's fine, but I think it's kind of like it's presumptuous to assume that the player wouldn't want to interact with the game and give it like their time, like spend
Yeah.
their time watching adverts, because that's like a low form of like making money. I don't know, it's
Exactly.
weird.
It is a kind of assumption that ads is bad, and I
Mm,
think it does come from bad implementations. And I mean, so I have to own up to my bias. I was the original evangelist for what became Unity ads. So I
mm,
spent about 5 years of my life talking about ads as game design, as
mm,
a game design mechanic, and specifically
mm,
that because we saw there was a huge audience who actually suddenly realized that if you had the option to watch an ad to pursue things rather than spend money, you could actually engage in a game differently.
yes.
And that meant that more players could get more value out of the game
Hmm.
properly, but they got that value via the method of watching the ad.
Yeah.
I think the really interesting thing was when I got to have chat to Matt Hall from Hipster Whale at I think it was Casual Connect in Amsterdam. Don't ask me what year. I'm going to say 2014. It was possibly earlier. Anyway, Matt is a fantastic guy, well worth chatting to if you ever get the chance. And
Mm,
he and I were just talking about this as designers in
mm,
terms of well, actually, what we want to do is we want to set um, this promise of what the experience can be. So you want to have a good experience
mm,
because we want people to engage with the ads.
mm.
It's almost like we have to think of an ad in the rewarded sense,
Yeah.
almost like a product, almost as an experience in itself
Yep.
that has value. It is a transaction. So I actually look at, and this
Mm,
is going to, again, we're kind of not quite going into where I was expecting to go, but it's interesting still, because I think what's interesting here is that I like to look at monetization as a form of design. I'm looking at exchange,
mm.
whether that is time spent
Yep.
or spending the resources that you earn, the coins or the gold or the wood or
Mm,
whatever. I think they're exchanges just as much as spending real money, although obviously real money has a different level of consequence and context.
yeah.
Subscriptions have another level of
Oh yeah.
effect on the game experience and the expectations of players.
Mm,
To my mind, monetization and game design are intrinsically linked. Would
yes.
you agree with that?
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And this is something that I have like a specific, very interesting background, I think, because I was born in Romania. I spent most of my childhood there. Um, all of the spending power on mobile games, especially when it comes to in-app purchase, comes from like the western side of Europe and the USA, right?
Yeah,
And that's not to say that there's no money coming from anywhere else, right? But I remember vividly a time when there was when I was younger, when there was no way to play any games because mobile games didn't exist. um,
yeah,
and there was the only way that we could get to play a game was actually to pirate a game.
Yeah.
And I know that's like a super taboo thing to talk about, but to be frank with you, if I didn't pirate games when I was a child, I wouldn't be a games developer because I had no other access to it.
Agreed. No, I get it.